There is nothing wrong with you. If you feel tired, it is not because you are weak. It is not because you lack discipline. It is not because you have failed. It is because you have been carrying something that was never meant to be carried. Most people are exhausted long before life becomes difficult. They are exhausted from trying to manage themselves, from monitoring every thought, from adjusting every feeling, from correcting every moment that does not match an internal expectation. This effort feels normal because it has been practiced for so long, but normal does not mean natural. The law of being begins with a simple observation. Life does not require supervision. It requires presence. When you are present without interference, life organizes itself. This is not a belief. It is something you can observe. Your breath does not need instruction. Your heart does not need encouragement. Your body does not wait for permission to function. And yet, the mind assumes it must manage everything. This assumption is the root of exhaustion. Effort is not wrong, but unnecessary effort is draining. The effort to become someone else. The effort to hold an identity together. The effort to maintain control over outcomes. Control is often mistaken for responsibility, but they are not the same. Responsibility is responsive. Control is rigid. Control assumes life cannot be trusted, and so it tightens. It monitors, it interferes. The more it interferes, the heavier everything feels. This heaviness is not life. It is resistance. Resistance to what is. Resistance to what is already happening. Resistance to the moment as it presents itself. Notice this clearly. When you stop resisting, even briefly, there is a subtle release. Nothing dramatic, nothing euphoric, just a slight softening. This softening is the nervous system recognizing safety. The law of being does not aim for excitement. It points toward relief. Relief from unnecessary effort. Relief from self-surveillance. Relief from the constant pressure to improve. Improvement has become a quiet obsession. Even rest is often turned into a project. How to rest better, how to relax correctly, how to optimize stillness. But stillness cannot be optimized. It can only be allowed. The moment you try to achieve stillness, it disappears, because effort is movement away from what is. The law of being is not a method. It is an undoing of habits that were never questioned. The habit of self-correction, the habit of self-evaluation, the habit of measuring worth through productivity. Before these habits formed, there was a state where presence was natural, a state where you did not question your right to exist. You did not need to justify your stillness. You did not need to explain your rest. You simply were. That state has not been lost. It has been covered by noise from expectations, noise from fear, noise from learned urgency. Urgency is one of the most powerful disturbances of being. It convinces the system that something is wrong, that something must be fixed, that time is running out. But urgency is rarely true. It is often inherited, learned from environments where stillness was unsafe, where rest was judged, where worth was conditional. The body remembers this, and so it stays alert. Even when nothing is actually happening, the law of being is not about forcing the body to relax. It is about removing the pressure that keeps it tense. Pressure to perform, pressure to progress, pressure to be someone. The moment this pressure is questioned, not resisted, just questioned, space begins to appear. In that space, presence returns, not as an experience, but as a baseline. This is why the law of being feels subtle. It does not announce itself. It does not promise transformation. It simply reveals what remains when effort subsides. Many people fear that without effort, they will collapse. that motivation will disappear, that nothing will happen. But notice, life continues. The body continues. Breathing continues. Movement continues. What disappears is unnecessary strain, the strain of holding an identity together, the strain of constant becoming. The law of being does not remove action. It removes force. Action that arises from stillness is precise. It is timely. It does not drain. Action that arises from pressure is rushed. It is reactive. It consumes energy. The difference is not subtle. It is felt, but only when effort is allowed to pause. This pause is not laziness. It is intelligence. It is the system reorganizing itself. When you stop interfering, life has room to move naturally. You may notice discomfort when you first stop trying. This discomfort is not a sign of danger. It is effort withdrawing. It is control loosening. The mind may interpret this as something going wrong, but nothing is wrong. Something is ending. The habit of interference. The habit of tension. The habit of self-pressure. The law of being does not ask you to replace these habits. It asks you to see them. Seeing is enough. Once seen clearly, they begin to dissolve, not through force, but through irrelevance. You do not need to fight what you no longer believe. Rest is not something you do. It is what remains when doing stops. Presence is not created. It is revealed. And what is revealed was always here, waiting patient, unchanged. At some point you learned that being was not enough. You learned it quietly, not through words, but through reactions, through pauses that felt heavy, through approval that arrived only after effort, through attention that came only when something was achieved. And without realizing it, you adjusted. You began to lean forward internally. You began to anticipate, to scan, to prepare. This leaning forward became normal, so normal that stillness started to feel wrong, suspicious, unproductive. The law of being does not judge this. It understands it. Adaptation is not failure. It is intelligence responding to environment. But intelligence that is no longer questioned can become a prison. The prison is not effort. The prison is believing effort is required to exist safely. This belief creates a background tension, a subtle contraction, a constant readiness, even during rest, even during silence, even during moments that require nothing. This is why many people say they cannot relax, not because relaxation is impossible, but because relaxation feels unfamiliar. The nervous system does not recognize it as home. The law of being is not about forcing familiarity. It is about letting the system relearn, not through instruction, but through experience. Small moments of non-interference. Moments where nothing is adjusted, nothing is improved, nothing is managed, just moments where presence is allowed to be incomplete. Incomplete means unedited, unpolished, unoptimized. This feels uncomfortable at first because optimization has been confused with safety. But safety does not come from control. It comes from trust. Trust is not blind. It is earned, and the body earns trust by observing again and again that nothing collapses when effort pauses, that nothing disappears when control loosens, that life does not punish stillness. This observation cannot be rushed. The law of being moves at the pace of the nervous system, not the mind. The mind wants conclusions, timelines, proof. But the nervous system only understands experience. It learns slowly through repetition, through consistency, through the absence of threat. This is why trying to let go often fails, because trying is still effort, still control, still management. Letting go is not an action. It is the natural result of seeing that holding is unnecessary. You cannot force your hand to relax, but when you realize there is nothing to grip, the hand opens. The law of being is the realization that there is nothing to grip, no self to defend, no image to maintain, no moment to secure. This does not mean you stop caring. It means care becomes clean, unburdened. Care without anxiety, care without attachment to outcome. This is often misunderstood. People fear that without attachment, they will become passive, detached, cold. But the opposite is true. Attachment creates fear. Fear narrows perception. Narrow perception reduces intelligence. Presence without attachment is fully engaged, responsive, alive. The law of being is not about withdrawing from life. It is about meeting life without distortion. Distortion comes from projection, from carrying the past into the present, from rehearsing the future before it arrives. This rehearsal consumes energy, not because the future is heavy, but because it is imaginary. The nervous system cannot distinguish clearly between imagined threat and real threat, so it responds with tension, with vigilance, with contraction. This constant readiness is what exhausts people. Not work, not responsibility, but the internal rehearsal that never ends. The law of being ends rehearsal, not by suppressing thought, but by removing belief in its necessity. Thought is not the enemy. Identification with thought is the drain. When thought is seen as movement, it can pass. When thought is believed as command, it stays. The law of being invites a subtle shift. From believing thought to noticing it. This noticing does not require effort. It is already happening. Even now, something is aware of these words. That awareness does not strain. It does not lean forward. It does not correct. It simply observes. This observing is being, not a state, not an achievement, but the ground upon which everything appears. The problem was never lack of awareness. The problem was attention being hijacked by urgency. Urgency says, pay attention now or something will go wrong. The law of being reveals that nothing is wrong right now. In this moment, before thought finishes its sentence. This recognition is not intellectual. It is somatic, felt as a softening, a slight exhale, a drop in internal noise. These are signs not of success, but of alignment. Alignment is not effort. It is absence of conflict. Conflict arises when reality is argued with. Reality always wins, but the argument leaves residue, tension, fatigue, disappointment. The law of being ends the argument, not by convincing the mind, but by redirecting attention to what is undeniable, presence. Presence does not argue. It does not complain. It does not anticipate. It simply allows. Allowing is often confused with giving up, but allowing is strength. It takes strength to stop interfering. It takes courage to trust what you cannot control. Most control is an attempt to avoid feeling. Feeling uncertainty, feeling vulnerability, feeling not knowing. The law of being does not remove these feelings. It removes resistance to them. And when resistance ends, feelings move. They do not stagnate. They do not overwhelm. They complete themselves. This is emotional intelligence, not management, not suppression, but allowance. When feelings are allowed, they inform, they guide, they resolve. When feelings are resisted, they repeat, they intensify, they dominate attention. The law of being restores natural flow. Flow is not constant pleasure. It is continuity, the ability to move without obstruction. Obstruction comes from clinging to identity, clinging to outcome, clinging to certainty. Certainty is another illusion that drains energy. Life is dynamic, unpredictable, alive. Trying to fix it into a stable image creates friction. The law of being embraces instability, not as chaos, but as movement. Movement that does not need direction, Because it is already directed by intelligence far deeper than conscious planning. This intelligence is not mystical, it is observable. You see it in growth, in healing, in adaptation, in synchronization. You do not tell a wound how to heal. You do not instruct sleep. How to restore, you allow. And the system responds. The law of being applies this understanding to the whole of life. What you stop interrupting begins to function. This does not mean everything becomes easy. It means everything becomes honest. Effort is used when needed. Rest is taken when needed. Action arises when appropriate. Stillness remains when action is not required. Nothing is forced. Nothing is withheld. This is balance, not maintained, but lived. Many people are afraid to stop interfering because interference has become identity. If I don't manage myself, who am I? This question reveals the depth of conditioning. The law of being does not answer this question. It dissolves it. Identity is not lost. It is simplified, stripped of unnecessary layers. What remains is not emptiness. It is clarity. Clarity does not announce itself. It is quiet, stable, grounded. From clarity, choices become obvious. Not because you think harder, but because noise is absent. The law of being is not about reaching a state. It is about stopping the habit of leaving. Leaving the present. Leaving the body. Leaving what is here. Returning does not require effort. It only requires noticing that you never actually left. Attention wandered, but presence remained, always waiting unchanged. The exhaustion you feel is not from life. It is from resistance. The moment resistance pauses, even briefly, there is relief. Not dramatic, not permanent, but real. That relief is the body recognizing truth, not conceptual truth, but lived truth. The truth that nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be fixed, nothing needs to be achieved right now. Being is already complete. The law of being is remembering this, again and again, until remembering becomes unnecessary. Eventually, something quiet begins to happen, not dramatic, not sudden, just subtle. You stop reaching, not because you decided to stop, but because there is nothing left to reach for. The tension that once felt necessary begins to feel optional. The inner dialogue does not disappear, but it loses authority. Thoughts still arise, plans still form, memories still surface, but they no longer pull the center of gravity. The center stays. Here. This is not mastery. This is familiarity. Familiarity with being without commentary. Most people mistake awakening for intensity, for insight, for emotional release. But the law of being reveals something quieter. Stability. A stability that does not depend on circumstances. This stability is not excitement. It is reliability. The ability to remain when nothing is happening. The ability to stay present without stimulation, without purpose, without outcome. This is why many people avoid stillness. Stillness removes distraction, and distraction was hiding restlessness. The law of being does not remove restlessness. It reveals that restlessness is temporary. It moves, it fades when it is not fed. Feeding happens through attention. What you attend to, you energize. What you stop attending to dissolves naturally. This is not suppression. It is prioritization. Presence becomes primary. Thought becomes secondary. Emotion becomes information, not identity. This reordering changes everything, because identity was the source of struggle. Identity requires defense. Defense requires vigilance. Vigilance creates exhaustion. When identity loosens, defense relaxes. Energy returns, not as excitement, but as availability. Availability to respond instead of react. Reaction is fast, but blind response is slower but intelligent. The law of being restores response. This is why stillness feels powerful. Not because it does something, but because it allows clarity to emerge. Clarity is not opinion. It is seeing without distortion, without urgency, without fear. Fear is not eliminated, but it is no longer in charge. Fear becomes a signal. Not a commander signals inform, commanders control. The law of being removes fear from command and places it back where it belongs, as information. Many people believe they need fear to survive, but survival is not the same as living. Fear contracts. Life expands. Expansion does not mean recklessness. It means openness. The openness to experience without prejudgment, without resistance, without constant evaluation. This openness is what children have naturally, before conditioning teaches them to brace, to anticipate, to protect. The law of being is not becoming a child again. It is releasing unnecessary armor. Armor once had a purpose, but carrying it forever becomes a burden. When armor drops, movement becomes fluid. Energy circulates, attention rests. This resting is not sleep. It is alert relaxation, a state where nothing is forced, yet nothing is avoided. This is the paradox: effortless attention, engaged stillness. The law of being does not seek to explain this. Explanation belongs to the mind. Experience belongs to presence. Presence does not need explanation. It needs permission. Permission to remain. Permission to be incomplete. Permission to not know. Not knowing is often feared, but not knowing is freedom. Knowing locks perception. Not knowing keeps it open. The law of being operates in openness, where possibilities exist, where outcomes are not fixed, where intelligence can move. Trying to control outcomes narrows intelligence. Allowing outcomes expands it. This does not mean passivity. It means cooperation. Cooperation with reality. Reality is not hostile. It is responsive. When you stop fighting it, it supports you. Not by giving you what you want, but by aligning you with what is sustainable. Sustainability is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, consistent, grounded. This is why the law of being does not appeal to the ego. The ego wants recognition, achievement, confirmation. Being wants continuity, presence, truth. Truth is not what you believe. It is what remains when belief relaxes. When belief relaxes, you do not disappear. You simplify. What remains is not emptiness, it is fullness, not emotional fullness, but existential fullness. The sense that nothing is missing. This sense does not depend on success or failure or validation. It exists before evaluation, before comparison, before narrative. This is why the law of being cannot be taught. It can only be pointed to. And even pointing is secondary, because presence recognizes itself without instruction, without technique, without effort. The moment you stop searching, you notice you were already here. The search was happening within presence, not outside it. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to resolve. For this recognition to occur, this recognition does not end life. It deepens it. You still plan, still create, still engage, but without the weight of self-importance, without the anxiety of outcome. Action becomes expression, not compensation. You no longer act to prove existence. Existence is assumed. This is freedom, not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from internal conflict. Responsibility remains, but it is clean, direct, undistorted. When responsibility is clean, it does not drain, it grounds. The law of being grounds you. Not in identity, but in reality. Reality does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be present. Presence is enough. It always was. The exhaustion you carried, the pressure, the constant striving, they were symptoms, not of failure, but of misunderstanding. You were trying to become something that you already were. The moment this is seen, not intellectually, but somatically, the body releases, the breath deepens, the mind slows, not by force, but by relief. Relief that the struggle is optional. Relief that effort can rest. Relief that being does not require permission. The law of being does not promise happiness, it promises honesty, and honesty is stabilizing. From stability, peace emerges, not emotional peace, but structural peace. A peace that remains, even when emotions fluctuate, even when thoughts race, even when life challenges. This peace is not fragile because it is not created. It is discovered beneath effort, beneath resistance, beneath identity. It was always there, waiting, not for you to improve, but for you to stop interfering. This is not the end. There is no end, only continuity. Being continues moment after moment, unconcerned, unaffected, available. The law of being is not something you practice. It is something you remember, and remembering is effortless, because truth does not require maintenance. It only requires recognition. Right now, without changing anything, without fixing anything, without understanding everything, you can notice that you are here, aware, present, unmoved. This noticing is enough. It always has been.